Alright, it tells us to use the factors to identify the zeros of x cubed plus 3x squared minus x minus 3, and then sketch a graph. Okay, so this method is called factoring by grouping. Factoring by grouping. And how do you know when to use this type of method? It's pretty easy. You just have to count the number of terms. Class, count with me. Ready, set, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. You see, in the previous problems, we've been working with trinomials. They only had 3 terms. This one has 4 terms, so I'm going to do the problem in 2 ways, and then you pick the method that works best for you. Okay? The first thing I'm going to do is called 2 GCFs, or 2 greatest common factors. So I'm going to rewrite the problem. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover up the last 2 terms. I'm just looking at the first 2 terms here. Class, what's my greatest common factor here?
3. X squared.
X squared. Okay. What's left? X squared times something equals x cubed. X. And x squared times something equals 3x squared. Plus 3. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same thing over here. And my goal is to get a parentheses that's exactly the same as this one over here. See if I can use a different color. These parentheses should be exactly the same. What's your GCF? -1. So -1 times something equals -x. This is going to be what? X. -1 times this will equal -3, so this will be a plus 3. Okay, that's called the first greatest common factor. The second greatest common factor is the red. Do you guys see the red? They both have a x plus 3. May, are you here? May. Oh, good. I didn't see your hand. So notice how these both have an x plus 3 in common. Now I just need to write what's not in red. That would be x squared minus 1. Again, to check my answer, you're like, how does this work? You're taking this whole red thing and you're distributing it. So if you wanted to, the parentheses x plus 3 squared will give you this. Parentheses x plus 3 times a -1 will give you this. And we need to factor completely. We're almost done. This one here is x squared plus 0x minus 1. Remember, this is your A term, this is your C term, so you're missing a B here. That's why I added a 0. And then I can just put in my x here, and what I'm doing right now is I'm just factoring this one. So class A times C. B value. 2 numbers that multiply to be -1 but add to be 0. -1 and +1, right? So let's write that. -1, +1. So I'm going to have x plus 3, x minus 1, x plus 1. So this is my factored form. And this is using a method called 2 greatest common factors. Find the GCF, and then take the GCF again, and in this problem, we just had to factor one more time. Okay? The second one is kind of more consistent with what we've done before, is the Xbox method, and I just use the box. Watch this. So I'm going to draw a box. Have you guys seen a box like that before? Yeah, and what's nice is you just put these 4 terms, each one in one per box. So I'm going to have x cubed, 3x squared, negative x, minus 3. And I'm not sure if it's important or not, but the direction in which I went and put it into the box is like a Z. Let me show you what my Z looks like. You see that? And all I need to do now is just get what's on the outside of the box. So if you think about factoring, it's the same thing, right? So class, what's the greatest common factor here? X squared. Greatest common factor? You kind of already did it in the last problem. Negative 1. Greatest common factor here? X. And greatest common factor? Plus 3. And remember, you can always multiply it to check your answer. Class, what's x times x squared? 3 times x squared. X times negative 1. And negative 1 times 3. Negative 3. So I get x squared minus 1 and x plus 3. And that looks exactly like the last problem, doesn't it? You can just factor it again. So that one became x plus 1, x minus 1, and that's x plus 3. So I have 2 ways of factoring in this problem. You can either use the 2 GCFs or put it inside the box. Okay, let's just finish the problem. I just factored. Now I need to find the zeros. Well, how do I find the zeros? I just set them equal to 0. That means that x is going to be equal to negative 1. How did I get negative 1? You put x plus 1 equals 0. X minus 1 equals 0, and x plus 3 equals 0. So class here, x is equal to what? 1, and then x is equal to negative 3. Let's go ahead and sketch these 3 zeros now. We factored, we set it equal to 0 to identify the zeros. So I have negative 3, negative 1, positive 1. You have a cubic function. Odds start down, end up. And the multiplicity for each of these are 1s. So I'm going to do a shoot through. The y-intercept is also your constant. So negative 3. And that's what your sketch looks like. But the big idea, or the skill that I want you to learn here, is the factoring by grouping.